This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so this is our part one online course. Basically, this is our MRCOG help courses. We have part one, part two, and part three. Me and Juma, we both take the courses together. So half of sessions will are divided among us. Half of the syllabus covered by me, and half of the syllabus will be covered by the Juma. So this is how our courses run. For this, the part one course, what I'm going to discuss today is that because this is an orientation session, so basically my agenda is that since you are new to MRCOG, I don't know how many have booked the exam. Maybe if you are just in a process of deciding whether they should go for MRCOG or not, or some have sent their eligibility but have not booked their exams, and some have booked their exams and they are busy in preparation. So it's good that if you are planning for July, then start from now, because at least 3 to 4 months is required for taking this exam seriously. For preparing for MRCOG part 1, you need at least 3 to 4 months if you have a dedicated study of 3 to 4 hours every day. Okay, because less than this, if you have less time than this, then you require more months to prepare. So today for orientation, my agenda is why MRCOG, what is MRCOG, how many parts and everything, how it runs further. Because once you are over with the part one, you have to go to part two and part three and then other parts. So you should know from the beginning that what in all what process you are actually entering and what you will be going through. So to plan your strategy properly, you should have an overview of how MRCOG is. There are various facts and myths regarding the MRCOG, so we'll be discussing those facts. Then focus on part 1 syllabus. What does part 1 include and how is the exam like? What is the pattern of the exam? Books, what are recommended by the RCOG and books we recommend. Then there is a concept of smart study. How to choose, how you can study, why choose us, and then we will discuss a small topic of water and body fluids, which is very important topic. It seems small and most of the times neglected in our PG days because it does not seem to be important. But I'm afraid to tell you, RCOG has very much so many things which we neglected in our UG and PG days. But for RCOG, they are the most important things. So we have to now focus on, not we had already thought that it was important in our UG days or PG days. Now what is important is that we want to know what RCOG wants us to learn, because now we are appearing for the RCOG exam. So it is something like you have to tune your brain into the RCOG mode. So many times you will have to shift your thinking from your regular study or whatever you have done till now. Even when you go for the part two, then it becomes very difficult for you to give the answers if you have in mind what you are doing right now in a practice. Okay, so that is not going to help you. Now, from this onwards, if you are appearing for the MRCOG, make yourself shift into the RCOG mode, and that is very important. Now, understanding MRCOG, what are the career prospects? There are two ways. Some people are planning to go to. I would suggest please mute your mic. Whoever has his mic open, otherwise it would be difficult for everyone to hear. Okay. So there are still someone's mic is on. Please take care. Whoever has this green sign, please mute your mic by clicking on it. Whoever has this mic symbol green, please click on it to mute it. Okay. So there, why MRCOG? There are two things. Either you are looking for going to UK or you are staying in the other countries. If you are going to want to go for the UK, then yes, this is the right track, because you need to finish your MRCOG 1, 2, and 3 all parts and get your GMC registration done, then you can apply in the jobs for the UK. So this is why you require MRCOG when you have to plan to UK. But what about the other countries? Like here in India, its importance is that you are upgrading your educational qualification, which may help you when you are applying for the corporate jobs or somewhere. And other important, what I think is that the most important is, since we don't have very good guidelines in our Indian scenario practice, so most of the times we actually practice according to what has been taught by seniors in a PG days, or what we see how people are going, whoever they are along with us. But when you know the evidence-based structure, then you can practice more confidently, you have a good overview. And secondly, many other soft themes which are not addressed in our PG days, like how to counsel the patient, how to break the bad news, how to talk with the communicate with the colleagues, or how to do some clinical governance types of things, like some surveys, some audits you want to do, you want to write a paper, or even your teaching skills. So RCOG works on you not only as a clinician, he also brings the best teacher out of you, he also brings the best clinician out of you, then you become a good researcher also, because as you go for the part 2 and part 3, they will cover various modules which includes all of these aspects. For them, a doctor is not only a clinician, he has various other roles also, which they actually teach you to fulfill that role. Okay, so that is why they are important. And then this qualification is very well recognized in the countries like Dubai, Saudi, and all these Middle East countries, and other countries outside India also. It is a good gold standard qualification which is recognized everywhere as a measure of your, as a evidence of your like how good you can work, of your efficiency. Then this is the format for the MRCOG exam. We have part 1, part 2, and part 3 exams. Part 1 exam is usually in the July and the January. Part 2 is again in the July and the January. And part 3 in May and November. Part 1 exam is totally a single best answer exam. Okay, so it's a single best answer. Now, what is the, why specifically they use the term single best answer? Choose the best answer. One answer is not the actually correct answer. In these questions, you will get the options which are very close to each other. So at least 2 or 3 of the options may seem to be correct. But as the name signifies, this is a single best answer. So if you find 2 or 3 options to be correct, still you have to look for one single best option. So that is why, that is the main area of confusion in these questions. You have a lead statement and then you have 5 options in front of you. Okay, sometimes there is one correct option which you can quickly tick if you are confident of, but many a times you see 2 or 3 matching options which all seem to be correct. So this is the like main theme of the single best answer, is that you have to choose among those correct ones also which is the best. Okay, that is why it is known as single best answers. Okay, so all the questions, there are 2 papers, part paper 1 and paper 2. There is division of subjects in these papers. We will just go through that in detail, how these papers are and how many subjects are covered in these papers and what is the marks distribution. We'll just go through that. But to summarize here is that in part 1 we have 2 papers, paper 1 and paper 2, both carry 100 questions, and all the questions are the single best answers. So you have to choose one option out of the 5 options in all the questions. Now for the part 2, there are 2 types of questions. Some are single based answers, which already are same what we have dealt in the part one, like a lead statement, then 5 options, and then you have to choose one option. And the other thing is that there is a EMQ pattern, extended matching questions. This is something very different. We don't have these questions in any of our competitive exams. And these are the rate limiting questions, because it is these questions that most of candidates actually fail in part 2 because of this EMQs. Okay, so what is EMQ? You have around 20 options in front of you, and then you have 3 scenarios which are linked to those options, which have answers in those options. Okay, and these 3 scenarios may be connected to each other, like a patient comes in labor at 2 centimeter, this was the finding, then she progressed at 6 centimeter, this was the finding, that full dilatation, this was finding. So they could be connected, or they could be from the, they are not connected to each other, but they are from the same topic. Okay, so actually you have to choose the answer from those 20 options, in which out of 20, at least 4 or 5 will be very much similar to each other. So these questions require a very good basic knowledge, very good understanding to reach to one proper option. So that is why the pass rate of the part 2 is usually less, and that is why part 2 is considered to be the most difficult part of among the part 1, part 2 and part 3. This is because of this EMQ pattern, because we are not accustomed to it, so we have to practice more for that. Then part 3 is totally a clinical exam. It's a like a viva exam, or I could say a practical exam. It's not a written exam. You have 14 stations, but it's not like our vivas where examiner asks you the questions. No, it's like you have a patient who is a role player in front of you. He is there in your clinic, and you have to answer that patient, satisfy that patient. The case scenario is given, and you have to do that. Okay, so there are other structured discussions and other types of stations also, but there are total 14 stations, and it's totally a clinical exam. So this is in May and November. Now we talk of part 1, because that is the main agenda here. We are here for the part 1. So now various important days for the part 1 are: eligibility application closes on 5th March. So still you have one more day. If any case you have not thought of doing till now, but you want to do in July, then there is still one day when you can submit your eligibility application. There is eligibility form available on the site, RCOG site. You can download it, fill it, and you can send your eligibility. Then eligibility clearance takes around 4 days, 4 weeks. It could be within 4 weeks you will get a mail from the RCOG that your eligibility is confirmed. Eligibility means that they will verify your MBBS degree. Okay, so if your MBBS degree is fine, you can have this eligibility. So that is why for clearing part 1, you don't need the PG. If you are plain MBBS, you can still go for the part 1 exam. And once you clear the part 1 exam, this will remain valid for the 7 years. Okay. So within next 7 years, you have to do the part 2. You have to appear for the part 2 exam. Not exactly that you have to pass. You have to appear for the part 2 exam. So now exam booking closes on Thursday. After you get the eligibility, then you can apply for the exam. You can book the exam, and that is the 30th April. Exam date is 6th July this time, and fees they have there are different bands for the various countries, so it's 475 pounds. So it's quite a high amount from the our Indian point of view, or I may say adjacent countries like Bangladesh, etc. So I think it's better to than spending again and again. You have to go and spend the fees and go through the mental torture. So it's better to plan, strategize, do a focus study, and then appear for the exam. This will definitely help you in saving further expenditure and even your mental stress. Exam centers in India, we have 3 centers, so it's good. You can easily choose center of your choice. Now, what are various myths and facts related to MRCOG? It is necessary to go to London for experience. This is a very common myth. Many people who meet me, they ask me whether how many days you went to London. No, you don't require to go to London. You can do it from your home country if you have exam center. Only thing is that you have to go to exam center to take the exam. So if like we had a center at Delhi, so you can do everything part 1, part 2, part 3 from the Delhi. There is nothing like that you need a work experience in London to do that. It is very tough, takes a lot of attempts to pass. Yes, it's tough in the sense that we are not practicing what they are doing in their country. But if you understand the pattern and focus your efforts accordingly, you are be strategic, then you can easily go through this exam in one attempt. So what you have to do is you have to be very much focused, you have to be strategic, you have to be targeted, because if you like take in part 1 you have around 13-14 subjects. If you start reading all the books, going through everything, you will take around 6 months to finish that books, not less than that. And then by the time you come to revision, you have forgotten what you have read in the beginning. So that is what is not needed. You have to be focused and targeted for only the important things, which you can revise again and again in 2-3 months period and go for the exam. So you cannot work with the exam preparation. No, it's not right, because you need 3-4 hours of study. Or to begin with, you can start with 2 hours, but later on when the exam is near, definitely you will need around 4 hours of study. So that in a time, if you can take out from your work schedule, no need to leave your work. Okay, nobody takes leave for these. Maybe you can take leave for 4-5 days in the last when you are like near to exam, but no need to take leave for a months together. Then what is the part 1 syllabus? This is the paper 1 and this is the paper 2. The subject distribution is done by the RCOG, so accordingly the questions appear in the exam. But like subjects like statistics and genetics, there could be overlap between the two papers. Okay, so anatomy, biochemistry, embryology, endocrinology, epidemiology and statistics, genetics and physiology. These are the subjects covered in first paper, and second paper, as you see, these are mostly the subjects from the part 2 exam and also the clinical type of things. So clinical management and data interpretation. These are the two clinical type of questions which appear in the exam. Now these are actually not two different subjects, because there is no subject like data interpretation or clinical management in the MBBS. Okay, so rest all are different subjects. So what does these include? These are basically the amalgamation of all the subjects. Like in clinical management, you can get some case scenario, then there are some reports in front of you. So you have to make accordingly the further option or further diagnosis of what have been asked. Although it will not include the proper gynae ops management you are needed to do, as you will be asked in the part 2. But there will be small things like if you have to diagnose the anemia, what type of anemia. They have given you hemoglobin, they have given you the MCV, MCHC values, PCV values, and the peripheral blood film, and you have to diagnose what type of anemia is this. Similarly, there are other acid-base balance questions which usually we are not acquainted to. These are very new type of questions, because from the arterial blood gas analysis given to you, you have to diagnose whether it is a respiratory acidosis, respiratory alkalosis, or what type of thing this is. So these are also included in data interpretation. Then there are some reports of late which are they are giving from the NICE guidelines or the GTG. Like they have targets for the PIH, that up to what level the blood pressure should be maintained, at what level you will consider it as PIH. So these target values from the NICE guidelines. So you have to note that. Then for the diabetes patients, because there are values according to HbA1c, what should be the value when you will not allow patient to become pregnant, what is the normal value. So all these targets you have to know from the guidelines. So you don't have to read the complete guideline for the part 1, but few selective guidelines you will need to go through when you are going through these questions of data interpretation and clinical management, because they have a good clinical part. Oncology forms cancers form a very important part of this paper too. You get a lot of questions from the oncology, and all the genital cancers like type of ovarian cyst, ovarian tumors. So all these type of things are very important part because they are you read in the pathology. So from the pathology point of view and from the clinical management point of view, oncology, although is not visible here as a subject, not written in the syllabus of the MRCG Part 1, but it is included in the pathology and the clinical management, and you get a good number of questions in the Part 2. So it is very important. Then definitely these two are the things which take quite a bulk of this paper, paper 2. So if you are not able to apply your knowledge of physiology, like in physiology or the endocrinology, you have read about the what hormones are produced by the adrenal glands. Now, Conn syndrome. If you get a like in front of you the level of various hormones, then what type of syndrome is this? This will come in clinical management. So this way there is an overlap between the two papers. Like in anatomy, if you have some, you have read some anatomy, but its clinical implication will come in clinical management. So any type of nerve injury that can be included in the clinical management. So clinical management and the data interpretation make the paper too tough. Okay, most of the people after going through both the papers find the paper too tough because it has so much varied presentations for clinical management and data interpretation. And for data interpretation, definitely you need to practice on some questions like pedigree analysis, which is included in the genetics, but pedigree analysis can appear in data interpretation. Then interpretation of various reports, like I told you, were the levels of diabetes, hypertension, or you may get some progesterone levels and you have to comment on whether the patient is ovulating, cause of infertility. So these basic things, basic reports which you go through day in and day out in your practice, like liver function test, and all these you might need to interpret here. The most important ones where we actually fail or where there is a problem is mostly the CTG problems. Then you have acid-base balance questions. Definitely there will be 2-3 acid-base balance questions, and you need to know how to work on them. Then there are some pedigree charts where you need to manage. And then clinical management also includes some pictures like ultrasound pictures or some MRI scans or some histopathology report. So you have to comment on that. So these questions definitely needs practice. And whenever you are reading various subjects, don't forget to read their clinical implications. Okay, because those clinical implications will be asked here in the clinical management. Particularly important is the physiology, endocrinology, and anatomy. Okay, because biochemistry does not have that much importance in clinical presentations. Then embryology again, not much direct questions come from the embryology. And but endocrinology is a very important topic because you have multiple syndromes included in it, starting from the pituitary to the thyroid, then adrenal glands, cortex, medulla. You have Addison's, you have Cushing's, you have Conn's. So there are many syndromes associated with the endocrinology. This is a very important subject for the part 1 syllabus. Now there is a fixed distribution of how you have a questions. So when you are preparing for the part 1 exam, it is important to focus and divide your time accordingly the weightage carried by any subject. Like if anatomy is an important subject, it carries around 15 to 20 questions. Now you see out of 100, if 15 to 20 questions are of anatomy, how important this subject is. Secondly, what is the beauty of anatomy is that there is nothing new happening in it. What information is already fixed is fixed. It will never change. If this is a nerve supply, this is a nerve supply. If this is the area supplied by this artery, this is the area supplied by this nerve, it will remain fixed. It will never change. So there is no like confusion you will have in the exam. If you are sure of like which nerve supplies this, yes, you are sure of it, you are going to tick mark it. You will never get confused in it. So anatomy questions are very, very scoring. If you are good at anatomy, you can easily score on 15 to 20 questions, which is out of 100, a big content. Okay, so like mostly, usually the pass marks revolve around the 65%. It could be 1-2% less, or it could be 1-2% more. So if you target your studies according to 75%, then definitely you are sure that you can pass the exam. Okay, because in RCOG, every question does not carry equal marks. Like if you have 100 marks paper, then if you have 60 right, you will get 60% no. This is not a pattern of RCOG. Every question has a different weightage of marks. It is decided by the percentile. If it's an easy question, most of the people are answering it right, then it carry less weightage. If it is a tough question, most of the people are not able to answer it, but you have answered it, then it carries more weightage. So you will get more marks for that. So accordingly, there is a difference in the marks of every question, which you will not be able to assess yourself. Okay, so you have to think of like attaining 75% marks. If you target it, then you are on a safe side of a 65% and you are able to pass. This is because we have to make a target. As I said, we cannot read 13 subjects in a 3-4 month period. Even if you study for 6 months, still I think it will not be possible to remember everything. So you have to strategize what to read, what is more important, which subject needs more time, what topics are important. So that all you need to strategize. Then you can do it easily. So anatomy in first paper, then endocrinology again 15 questions, stats again 15-20 questions. Okay, then comes the physiology. Physiology again around 15 questions. If you include endocrinology with the physiology, then it will be around 30 questions. Okay, now comes the role of biochemistry, genetics, and embryology. So 5 questions from these. So together they will form the 100 marks. Similarly, when you come to paper 2, clinical management and data interpretation, you can alone keep it as 30 questions. Then immunology and biophysics, you will have 5 questions, 5 to 6 or 7 like this. Then microbiology and pharmacology, again 20 questions. Okay, pathology is usually included in the clinical management and data interpretation. There could be some separate questions like on a clotting cascade, wound healing, and all these are important topics. So main thing is you should be able to formulate your strategy. Which subject you are going to devote more time? What are the topics included in that subject? And out of those topics, which are more important topics? Okay. So this way we have to plan our studies for the part 1 exam. This is the distribution of the marks. So you see anatomy carries a big chunk, statistics carries a big chunk, and the endocrinology carries a big chunk. So these are 3 very important topics in the paper 1. Then paper 2, as I told you, data interpretation and clinical management, they carry a big chunk. So they are huge triangles here. And then there is microbiology and pharmacology. And then come the come other smaller topics like biophysics or immunology and this pathology. So pathology actually is not a smaller topic, but it is actually included with the clinical management and data interpretation. So these together 3 will have around more than 40 questions. So very important. Now these are difficult modules which can bring you down. In paper 1, statistics, most of the people actually think that they can just go without statistics, but it is very difficult to pass without statistics, because if you don't have 15-20 questions you lose just, then you have only 80 questions to score. And it will not be possible that out of 80 you know around 75. It will be a difficult deal. So you have to do the statistics. You cannot leave it. Statistics is not a subject you can leave. But let me tell you that if you know the statistics, you can score on 20 questions very easily because it's maths. If you know how to do the plus minus, how to do the calculation, what does this mean, you can easily score on it, and this can bring you a good, very good score rather. Endocrinology, there are many confusing syndromes, various presentations, Cushing's, Addison's, and all that. So you have to be clear where this is hyperkalemia, where this is hypokalemia, where hyponatremia. So all these things should be very clear in your mind. Genetics, definitely you get important questions from the genetics also. Then comes the paper 2. In paper 2, as I told you, these are the most important things because in microbiology, pharmacology, biophysics, you usually get the repeated type of questions. There are some fixed formats. You can get some new questions, but still quite there is a repetition. But clinical management and data interpretation, even if there is a repetition, still the scenario might change. And then you have to recognize that you have solved such type of question. Okay, so what is the problem with the recalls? Most of the people have this thought in their mind that with recalls they pass the exam. So many people, how they go for part 1 is that they do the recalls again and again and go for the exam. But sometimes it works and sometimes it does not work. Why it does not work? Because recalls or the past paper questions does not appear as such in the exam. The main target is that you should know the information pertaining to that topic. That you can take out the topics from the recall, that these are the topics which are being asked again and again in the exam, but then you have to do that topics thoroughly. It does not mean that you read the question and like remember the answer and you will go for the exam. No, because they will not appear same to same. The concept will be same, but the question formulation will be different. So you have to be very clear with the concept to apply that recall question to your exam question. Okay, so building up the concept is very important. Now, how to study? Definitely consistent efforts work. You have to be very consistent, that you have to be regular in your studies because these are not the things you are doing daily in your practice. So you have to learn them, revise them again from your back days, long before you read all these topics. Maybe if someone are like fresh from the undergraduation preparing for the pre-PG exam or the NEET exam, so they might be good in these subjects, but still there are various things which RCOG is very much different from our Indian curriculums. So we have to focus on those points separately. Consistent efforts are really focused and targeted because so many subjects very difficult to clear. So you have to make a strategy. What topics you need to clear, how much in detail you will go, revise again and again. Because just single reading, if you go through all the books once, it means nothing. It means you have not learned anything. You will not be able to remember anything. Then to revise and to remember the concept and to see how it applies in the questions, solve as many questions possible. This is the best thing it's going to help you in the exam. As many questions you can solve, solve them. Because once you solve the question, you make a mistake and then you like try to find out the answer, you will remember it till exam. But otherwise, if you just see the question, cram it up, you will forget it. So again, the thing is that you have to build your concepts. It should be your conceptual building, not just cramming up. Then smart study. Yes, we have to find out what we need to study and then accordingly strategize and study. Group versus solo. You can sit at your home, take a book and study, but the result might not be that good because it is difficult to retain. What you have read sitting at your home singly, it is very difficult to retain. So for all MRCOG parts, It is just part one that still you can do solo, but part two and part three, it always needs a group practice. Because in group, you solve the questions, you have discussions, and once you discuss the thing, you go through it thoroughly, you tend to remember that point. Okay, so group discussions are very important. Even if you are not doing any course, if you are not following, still follow any particular group and at least make a group of 5, 6 people and study in a group. That will help. Why 5, 6 people? I'm saying because if you have 2, 3 people, sometimes somebody is busy in some work, somebody sometimes has some family commitment, so people may not be available. So in that case, you should have a group of 5, 6 people. So at least at any particular time, you are 2, 3 people discussing the questions. So this is the best way to study for MRCOG. Do a group discussions. Then how we can help us? We help you to excel because we actually do the homework for you. We choose the important content, summarize it, make it palatable so that you can remember it easily. Simultaneously make you practice questions and answers to fix the information then and there. So it's not actually a lecture that we are delivering. We actually let you solve questions in the class so that you can fix your information there only. Discussion of past paper questions in sessions as well as a dedicated Telegram group for the group for all the people who enroll for the course. Then subject-wise test to assess your performance. Like you have 1 week for one subject, then you have a subject-wise test for that subject so that you can assess how much you have learned. So now if you feel that you have not performed well in the exam, you can go back, see the topics which you have not performed well, you can again do that revision. Again, you can go and do the test again to see how much you have improved. Then finally, after covering all subjects, we have a final mock exam like a real exam, part one and part two both. And then you can do it under a like strict exam conditions that is up to you. Like you can fix 3 hours, you can sit, you can do a paper one, then you can take a 1 hour gap and do the paper two, because this is also a problem that once you are exhausted after the paper one in exam, then after 1 hour when you go back for the paper two, you are not that fresh because you are not tuned to sit for 7, 8 hours. Your mind is not able to work, so you can do initial practice at the home to see how your anxiety level is or how your performance varies when you have to sit on a long basis. Then all the recordings available till exam. Like we are having this session, this is being recorded. We give you the recordings so that you can revise these recordings. The more you listen, the more you will remember. Because listening with viewing in front of you as a screen will make you remember content more rather than just keep on reading from the book. Okay, because reading is one thing which you easily tend to forget. But when you listen, when you see, the information gets imprints on your mind. So why we provide maximum number of live sessions, because we actually don't believe that we throw all the information on you in a 3, 4 hours and then you have so much to do at home. Okay, so we believe that we should have smaller sessions. Like after 1.5 to 2 hours, your concentration starts diverting. So by the time it's 3 hours, you are almost sleepy. So not possible. So we have tried to make the sessions only 2 hour long, maybe 2 hour 30 minutes. And so we have kept the number of sessions more. Like not in a whole anatomy, we will not cover in one. We will do 2 sessions. Then we have a separate session for the embryology. So for all smaller subjects, we have one session. For bigger subjects, we will have two sessions. It is not like a lecture, we make it interactive by practicing questions and answers. All modules, including difficult topics like statistics, are covered. Notes will be with you. Whatever we are presenting here, these notes will be with you. Test questions, discussion in Telegram group. Whenever you attempt a test, you have some questions right, you have some questions wrong, you want to discuss those questions, you can easily do in the Telegram group. You can, even if you are solving other sources, you are solving the questions at home, you can put all your queries in the Telegram group, you can ask your queries in the live sessions and you will get all your answers. Then if you want to continue our journey with us, that's a different benefit. Now for today, I have taken a small topic, that is the water and the body fluids. I don't think most of us had paid so much attention to this topic in our UG days, but for RCOG, you at least get 2 questions from this topic. So it's a very important topic. Now, this is the total body water. What is the content is 42 liters. Then we have two compartments where we can have this water. So extracellular fluid is around 1/3 and intracellular fluid is around 2/3. Okay, so this all sentences are a question in itself, and these are from the recall questions. So you can get question on any of these sentences. So each and every sentence is important. So out of total body water, 1/3 is in the extracellular compartment and 2/3 is in the intracellular compartment. So intracellular compartment will remain inside the cells. When we classify further the extracellular fluid, we can have 3 compartments. One is the interstitial fluid, which is 3/4. Plasma is 1/4. So this is 30%. This is 9%. And transcellular fluid is only 0.5 liters, which is 1% of the total body water. Okay, so interstitial fluid is what? Which is in the spaces around the cells. Then plasma, what is in the blood, and then you have a transcellular fluid, which is in between the cells. So now what are the fluid losses? Lungs, which we usually expire, and we expire around 400 ml of water per day in the form of the vapors. Then from the skin, you have sweating. So it is 1 liter per day approximately. With feces, it's 100 ml per day, and with urine, it's 1.5 liters per day. So whenever you have to give the fluid replacement for maintenance, you can calculate it according to 30 milliliters per kg per day. So these are each and every sentence is a question from the recalls, and these are the important points you need to know from this topic. What is the clinical implication of this? Then whenever you are putting a patient on the IV fluid therapy, you need to give the IV fluids. Then you have to calculate the maintenance fluid according to 30 ml per kg per day. Now, important points regarding the fluids. Now, as I said, we have intracellular fluid, extracellular fluid, and plasma. So we have to remember which is the main anion or the cation in these, because these are responsible for the osmolality and the osmolarity. Further, when we will be dealing with the water and electrolyte imbalance, because water balance and electrolyte balance is quite a lot linked. Like whatever renin-angiotensin system or aldosterone system works, it works both on the water as well as on the electrolytes. So we have to be very clear what are the electrolytes acting where. Okay, so main intracellular fluid cation is potassium, and main intracellular anion is phosphate and protein. Now, if you have to choose one out of this, then phosphate has a bigger content as compared to protein. Okay, so these all the lines are questions. These are the points to be remembered. Main plasma cation is sodium. Main plasma anion is chloride. Main cation in extracellular fluid is again sodium, and main anion in extracellular fluid is again chlorine. So these are all important questions and important from the osmolality and osmolarity point of view. Now, when we talk of salt and water balance in health, there are multiple factors which work on it, multiple hormone regulations, endocrine regulations. So directly it is done by the antidiuretic hormone. This is a hormone which is secreted from the posterior pituitary gland, and it acts on the distal tubules and the collecting ducts in the kidney, where actually it leads to absorption of the water and the electrolytes. Okay, so whenever there is there is hypovolemia, you want to conserve the water in the body, this will be secreted. As the name signifies, this is antidiuretic. So it will prevent the excess excretion of water and electrolytes. So it will act at the distal tubules to absorb the excess water and the electrolytes. So these are the main important points, main crux of information we need to know about the antidiuretic hormone. Then regarding the indirect, there is atrial natriuretic peptide, which is present in the wall of the atria. So when it works according to the pressure inside the atria. Whenever there is a hypovolemia, there is less volume, the atrial distension is less, atrial pressure is less. So this will be secreted, and then this will again lead to, its secretion will be less. But whenever there is a hypervolemia, then the more the atrial pressure, more is the atrial distension, and then the atrial natriuretic peptide will be secreted from the atrial wall, and then this will lead to diuresis. This will lead to excess passage of water and electrolytes. So once the excess water and electrolytes is passed on, now the volume decreases, the atrial pressure decreases, and its secretion decreases. So this is for the diuresis. Then comes the renin-angiotensin system. This primarily regulates the plasma osmolarity and indirectly the blood volume, and it also works through the aldosterone. Okay, so what is osmolarity and osmolality, that we will just go in details. Then there are other minor regulators, glucocorticoids and catecholamines. These also work in the fluid regulations. Now what is osmolality and osmolarity? Osmolarity is the osmotic pressure in terms of osmoles per liter of solution, while osmolality is in terms of per kg of solution. Now what is the difference? The volume of the solution actually differs with the temperature. So the osmolarity can keep on changing, but osmolality remains constant. Okay, so overall osmolality is a good measure because it remains constant. It is not variable, but osmolarity is variable. But most of the time, still in practice, we measure the osmolarity. Now, what do we mean by 1 osmole? If I talk of like 1 osmole of sodium, okay, so what does it mean? Molecular weight of sodium in grams upon number of osmotically active particles. So how many particles are there and what is the molecular weight? So this is the way we calculate the 1 osmole. Total plasma osmolarity is 300 milliosmoles per liter. This is a figure you can remember, and sodium is the main contributor to the plasma osmolarity. So sodium is the main thing. That is why when we talk of like hypovolemia or hypervolemia, we talk of salt and water and sodium balance, because most of the osmolarity is dependent on the sodium. So sodium and water, these two things are to be worked on if whenever we are dealing with the any scenario in which fluid is either excess or fluid is less. Now this is the renin-angiotensin system. Renin is a protease enzyme which is formed from the juxtaglomerular apparatus of the kidney. We all have studied all this in our UG days. The purpose here is to bring the important points in front of you so that you again have that information in your mind. You can recollect it, and then we have to remember only points which are of clinical importance, which are important from the exam point of view. Okay, otherwise all the anatomy, all the physiology, everything you already have done. There is nothing new to be taught, but only purpose of the classes is that we highlight those information which is required for the exam point of view, so that you can remember only those points which are important. Because if you have few points to remember, you can revise them again and then you can do that in the exam. So renin is a protease enzyme from the juxtaglomerular apparatus of the kidney, and when it is secreted, what are the positive factors for its secretion? Whenever there is a reduced blood volume, that is a hypovolemia, or lowered sodium in the ultrafiltrate, or some neurohormonal factors are activated, like the sympathetic stimulation is there, then renin is secreted from this apparatus of the kidney. Once it is secreted, it acts on the angiotensinogen. which is secreted from the liver, and it is there in the circulation. But when renin is released, it acts on it and converts it into the angiotensin 1. Okay, so angiotensin, you have to remember from this is secreted, so don't confuse it with the kidney. Remember, it is produced by the liver and it is there in the circulation. Okay, the renin is produced in response to following aggravating factors, various stimulating factors which will act and release the renin. Renin will be released from the kidney. So this will be released, it acts on the angiotensinogen in the circulation and it converts it into the angiotensin 1. There is no active role of angiotensin 1, it's just a precursor of angiotensin 2, and that's all. Now, how it will get converted into the angiotensin 2? It will be acted on by the angiotensin converting enzyme. So, ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme. And remember, this has nothing to do with the kidney or the liver. This will be released from the endothelium of the pulmonary capillaries. Okay, so here you have three questions. From where is the renin released? From where is the angiotensinogen produced? And from where is the angiotensin converting enzyme produced? Okay, so three very important questions you have in this diagram. Now you need to remember this is from the kidney, this is from the liver, and angiotensin converting enzyme is from the endothelium of the pulmonary capillaries. So finally, it is the angiotensin 2 which is the active product and which will help us in the water and electrolyte balance. Okay, so this all chart carries quite a good amount of questions. When this will be stimulated, whenever there is a hyponatremia or a hypovolemia, then this renin will be secreted. So now how it works. Angiotensin 2, when released, it has two types of functions. One, it increases the systemic vascular resistance. How that it will do? It will directly lead to the vasoconstriction. When it constricts the vessels, there will be increase in the resistance. So all the systemic vessels, there will be a diffuse vasoconstriction and this will lead to increase in the resistance. Secondly, it also increases the sympathetic flow. So indirectly, it acts on the sympathetic glands, increases the flow, and this sympathetic flow will also go and cause the vasoconstriction. So by the vasoconstriction mechanism, by direct and indirect, it's going to increase the systemic vascular resistance. Now the second thing is that it increases the cardiac output. How does it increase the cardiac output? It actually decreases the passage of or excretion of water and electrolytes. So how does it do that? One, it will go and stimulate the antidiuretic hormone from the posterior pituitary, which is released and will come and act on the distal convoluted tubules or the collecting ducts and causes the absorption of water and electrolytes from there. So once it absorbs the water and electrolytes, now the water and electrolytes is preserved and there is more blood volume. So more the blood volume, more is the cardiac output. Similarly, aldosterone released from the adrenal cortex, that will also act on the same distal convoluted tubules and it will also go on absorbing the water and the electrolytes. Again, more the blood volume, more the cardiac output. Then it again goes and directly stimulates the thirst center. So you will have a thirst, you would like to take more in more of water. So as you take more of water, again that goes into the blood and increase in blood volume. So overall there is increase in the cardiac output and increase in the systemic venous resistance. So that way it then it helps you overcome the hypovolemia. Now, what are the clinical implications of this? Initially, when there is hypovolemia, this leads to through all this cycle, it will lead to absorption of water and salt from the excreted urine. So finally, the urine which is excreted will be concentrated urine and it will be low in sodium. Okay. Now, if the hypovolemia continues, there is further deterioration, then this whole system fails. And then comes the acute tubular injury. So in that case, now it is not able to concentrate the urine, not able to hold the sodium. So in acute tubular injury, how the urine will be It will be a dilute urine, osmolarity will be very much reduced, and it will be high in sodium. So dilute urine with low specific gravity and high sodium content. This is the feature of acute tubular injury. So now if you have a question from this and you have a clear concept of that cycle in your mind, then you will not get confused. Because in exam there will be options like dilute urine, high specific gravity and low in sodium. So this type of things, combinations they can form and give you 5 options. Now if you have a clear concept in your mind, you will never forget. Because here this angiotensin system is not working, it has failed. So nobody is there to concentrate the urine, nobody is there to hold the water and sodium. So finally you will have a dilute urine, you have a low sodium content urine, and because you have dilute, so specific gravity is also decreased. Excessive renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system is a hallmark of long-standing chronic hypertension. Now, if this aldosterone and angiotensin is being secreted excessively for a long period of time, then this will lead to increased systemic vascular resistance for a longer period of time. So what is increased vascular resistance? That we measure as a blood pressure. So if the systemic venous resistance is increased for a prolonged period of time, we will have a hypertension. So more is the blood pressure. So this is the hallmark of the long-standing chronic hypertension. So here we have a role of angiotensin converting enzyme inhibitors and angiotensin receptor blockers. So that is why these drugs are important for the management of the hypertension, because they are going to stop this, they are going to block the cycle at any particular stage, and because angiotensin level decreases, aldosterone level decreases, so systemic venous resistance, the vascular resistance decreases. Once the vascular resistance decreases, the blood pressure normalizes. So this is the way how when we read any particular concept, we have to know what are the clinical implications. Because clinical implications will be asked in the exam, but to remember these implications, you need to know what is the basic of that implication. If you don't know the clear basic there, you will get confused in all the options. So the basic concept should be very clear, then only you can apply that to the clinical scenario. So now we have some practice scenarios for what we have read. What is the main intracellular cation? If someone remembers from the previous slides, anyone can answer.
Sodium.
Is sodium, I think.
No, it's potassium, it's intracellular. There was difference in intracellular and extracellular. Okay. Main intracellular cation is potassium. Okay, so these are the direct questions in the exam. You cannot afford to lose these marks. So you have to remember these points. Go and take the answer and get your complete mark. What is the of the following is a major biochemical buffer in the intracellular fluid? So in intracellular fluid, buffers are usually the anions which work as buffer. So in the intracellular fluid, if you remember, we had
Protein.
yes, proteins and phosphates we had predominantly, and phosphates I said is usually more, but here there is no option of phosphate, so we will go with the protein. Now you see this is the single best answer. Like if you remember that phosphate is the highest content and you don't see here, don't get confused. The second is protein. So you have to choose the single best from the options. Where is the renin produced?
Kidney.
Yes. So now how this is yes, very right. This is a kidney. Now this is a smaller question. How this can be elaborated in the exam? Like they can give you some scenario of a hypertensive patient, that this is the patient who came to the clinic with this much blood pressure and he has a long-standing hypertension. What then the final answer question will be, where is renin produced? So they give you the long scenario so that once you go through that information, finally, by the time you reach the question, you are out of the mind. So what now you have to do is When you know the concept, you have to focus on what is the lead statement, what is the particular thing they are asking. Don't get confused in all of the scenario. Most of the information is just given just to make you go out of the way. Okay, so pick up the important information when you are reading the question. Always take a pencil with you. When you are reading, mark out the important things which you think could be important in answering your question. So finally, you will get a very small question like this where we have question is this only the top scenario will keep on changing. It will be different as you go through the various recalls, but question will remain the same. So if you focus on the question, you know the answer, you immediately take it and you are done. Kidney secretes and contains erythropoietin, renin, 125 hydroxycholecalciferol, 1 million nephron, all of the above.
It is all of the above.
Yes,
Renin.
because erythropoietin is also from the kidney. Then
All of the above.
once, yes, this is all of the 125 hydroxycholecalciferol. When we will study the calcium metabolism and D3 metabolism, we will go through this whole cycle also. And then there are nephrons and all of the above. Now, false statement among following. Aldosterone secreted from the adrenal cortex, L is missing, sorry. Aldosterone act on distal collecting tubule and collecting duct and absorb sodium ions. Aldosterone and angiotensin 2 stimulate the thirst and salt craving. Hypovolemia leads to decreased specific gravity in urine, and hypovolemia leads to increase in specific gravity in urine.
It is D. Hypovolemia leads to decreased specific gravity.
Yes. Now in hypovolemia, you will have a concentrated urine. So urine will have it will have high osmolarity and and then there will be low specific gravity. So hypovolemia leads to decreased specific gravity. This is very right because it's going. This is false because it is going to absorb the water. So urine will be concentrated. More will be the concentration. More will be the osmolarity, and more will be the specific gravity. So they have asked about the false statement. So hypovolemia leads to decreased specific gravity is a false statement. Rather, you will have the other opposite thing there. And that's how it's done, how we teach and how we make you answer the questions, and so that you can fix your information there. Any questions if anyone has? This was just a practice session, so I've taken a small module to cover here, small topic to cover rather.
Can we know the books beside Oxford recommended
Yes.
books, essential revision notes?
Yes, Oxford Revision Notes is the basic book, but the problem with that book is that it's you can say that it's a Bible of MRCOG Part 1. Because if you want to pass, you have to go through that book very properly. The problem with the revision notes is that it's a book in points. Okay, so you are not able to retain that information. So for going into the details, Essential Revision Guide is a very important book. It's a long book, more than 1000 pages book. So you don't have to read it from cover to cover. You can keep it as a reference book, and whenever you want to see diagrams, you want to elaborate on something, you want to see the explanation so that you can remember the points of Oxford. Then you can open that book, go through it just to understand what is the concept, and then what final information you will retain is from the Oxford. So it will help you as a reference book to understand the concept, because if you don't understand, you just try to cram up the points, then it becomes difficult.
So it is better that we should start doing the SBS and accordingly we should read retrogradely, isn't it? Hana? Or we should
No,
just learn, we should start
you
from the book.
yes, you have to learn the topic. Like you start from the anatomy. You will first have to do the anterior abdominal wall, the inguinal ligament, then whole of the pelvis, the muscles of the pelvis, the urogenital diaphragm. You should know that. Otherwise, how will you go and solve the SBS? And SBS books does not cover all the information you need to pass. So you have to get the information from the books. Like you can, that is why I'm saying you can keep the Oxford as a basic book because it will tell you what topics you need to cover in the anatomy. Okay, then you read those information. For any explanation, you look at the diagram in the essential revision guide, or maybe if you are more friendly with the diagrams of the books you used to study in your UG days, so you can refer to those diagrams also, because the main fundamental is that you should remember what you are reading. Okay, and Oxford is a bit difficult to read, but don't go otherwise. That read the SBA and then go the book, you will not be able to cover the syllabus. Half of the syllabus will be left in that case. So this is not a good thing to do.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Always read the theory first, maybe a smaller portion, search for the SBA, do that, and then come back to theory, go back to SBA. You definitely have to practice as many questions as possible, but don't start with the SBAs.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Welcome. Anything else?
Ma'am, the last question which you asked, ma'am, please will you go back to the last question? Hypervolumia leads to increase in specific gravity.
Yeah. There is a question mistake in formulation of question, so that is why I did discuss that in detail. So this is actually hypovolemia leads to
Increase
decreased specific gravity is a false, but here
false.
it should be hypovolemia leads to increase in specific gravity. Then it is a correct statement. If it is
Yeah,
hypovolemia, then
it
it
will
will
lead to.
also be a false statement.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, okay. Thank you, ma'am.
So any other questions? Okay, so we have a dedicated Telegram group, MRCG Help Part 1, which I think most of you are already in. If not, I can send you the links. You can enroll in that. We keep putting up the materials and sometimes questions and some discussions. But the most fruitful thing you can do with the group is that you can, like 5, 6 people in those group, whoever want to be active or who are for the July, they can divide the questions among, like you can plan some topic and then decide that today that person will be posting the question and then answer those. And whenever you have queries, you can tag us. We are there to answer all your concerns. This is not a course group. This is a group for everyone. Sometimes we may post the questions, or better is that you divide among 5, 6 people and do a good group study, and we are there to mentor you. So this way, this group study will help you. Okay, because it is actually not possible that daily we go and teach there on that group because of other sessions being running. Yes, we can off and on have some sessions which could be helpful some for everyone, like for the difficult topics like acid base balance, pH questions. So these can be dealt in a separate, like today I took this small session. So this way we can take smaller sessions, but you cannot go with these smaller sessions. You have to read, if you are not with any group, you have to do with a schedule study. You make your own schedule in a group of 5, 6 people and go on revising things, go on discussing questions. If you are with us continuing further, then we have planned that schedule for you. So we will take you through all the syllabus. And definitely, then you can discuss the questions in the group text, course group. But group discussion is a must. Anyway, you go either with any particular mentor or you go all together. You need a group discussion. Sitting at home and just reading and solving questions may not help you much in part 1, and in part 2 and part 3 it does not work at all. So make it a habit of good group study. Group study can only help. Okay, so this was the session for today. You all can give some feedback if you want to say something. Do you find it useful?
It was very useful session, Dr. Bhavna. Actually, we did not know what was the pattern of the exam. You made us very clear how to study and what is the pattern of the exam. Like it is a bit different from the MBBS like we used to study in the PG days.
Yeah, I think she's Anjana, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
We were not reading statistics. We were not reading like biophysics. You're not reading embryology in a proper way.
Yes, that's why I told you, because we have to shift ourselves on the RCOG mode. We cannot go with the MBBS or our Indian mode. If you stay on that, it will not work, because you
Like
have
you.
to take time to study those different topics. Like even we are not at all good at acid-base balance. Prior to
Yeah.
doing MRCG, I was not knowing how to read the arterial blood gas analysis and how to
Yeah.
see that
Exactly.
patient is metabolic acidosis or respiratory acidosis or
How to
respiratory
calculate the
albumin.
positive predictive value, how to calculate the what is the sensitivity, specificity, negative predictive. Like
Yes.
we were not taught this,
And
na, and
these
maybe we did
are
not pay
so
heed to it.
easy. These are so easy things that if you know the formulas, you can score. That's all.
Maybe
It's
put
just
number of
simple
questions.
division and multiplication,
Yeah.
but you need to know it. That is the main problem. Actually, the concept for part one people have built up is that you do the recalls and do the exam. No, it does not work.
No, no, no. It's
Maybe
not at all
it could have
possible.
worked for 1 out of 100%. Maybe it could have worked, but it is not a good thing to, like, you spend so much in opting for exam once. It's the fees has so been hiked, so it's almost too much costly. Why waste attempts? Why take so much of mental pressure? Why not go strategically?
Exactly. Yeah.
So good to know. Anyone else? There is some chat also.
Hi,
Okay.
ma'am.
Hi.
Hello, ma'am.
Hi.
This is Dr. Sana, ma'am. Actually, I want to ask: is 3 to 4 months is sufficient or sufficient for the part one MRCOG?
Yes, it's sufficient. Why? Because at least you will have to spare 2-3 hours daily. And
Okay.
second is that even if you like try that I'll give exam in July, okay, sorry, January. If you think that I'll take exam in January, then also you are not going to study from today. No matter
Yes, ma'am.
how serious you become, you will only study last 2 months.
Okay, ma'am. Definitely,
Nobody
ma'am.
can do that for one complete year. So whatever you will keep on doing today, you will keep on forgetting. So it's good to put your complete effort in a limited period of time so that you can concentrate on that and you can do it persistently. I don't think
Oh,
with work and family anyone can be persistent for 1 year.
okay.
So
Okay.
finally, even if you book the February exam, you will be studying for last 2-3 months only.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So
Thank you.
it's your call. You decide it now or you decide it after 6 months. It's totally your call. But finally, anyone will be reading only 2-3 months only.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome. Anything else? Yeah, hi
Hello,
Nidhi. Yeah.
I just wanted to know that eligibility and booking dates. What is the difference?
For eligibility, you have to send your eligibility application along with your MBBS degree. They will verify that your MBBS is from a proper college, like it's from a reputed or whatever, like they have colleges in their list. So they will verify that.
Deposition is till 20th of April. Fee
Yeah.
deposition is till 20. Fee deposition is till 20th of April.
Yes. Like I think
Okay.
you have appeared before now. So you have
Yeah, yeah.
done your
I will be doing the online. I'll be doing the
so
online.
no, you have once appeared in the exam now.
Mm-hmm.
So you have already done your eligibility. So now you just
Yeah.
have to go and book the exam. That's all. Just go, open it, you select the center and pay. And then it will
Okay.
show in your like exams and that column.
Okay.
For the new
Thank you.
people who are going for the first time, they have to send your eligibility first. So you could have sent that eligibility previously, no?
Mm-hmm. That is done. I was just
Yes.
like fee is till 5th or the fee is till 20th.
No, fees is still April. But nowadays, for last 1 year, I'm seeing that people are facing problem booking the centers of their choice. Like center
Yeah.
gets booked. So then you have to
Okay.
go for a different center. So if you are planning, better to book it earliest.
Early.
So that it is like Delhi is nearest to us. So you can go and
Mm.
book Delhi center. Otherwise, you will have to travel to Bangalore or Chennai. So what is the fun? If you have decided to appear for the exam, book it earlier.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Okay, anything else? Okay, friends. So bye bye, and we will be continuing further sessions in our course group. So if at all anyone is like thinking of joining, so you can text me, or we will keep on doing these small sessions in our regular MRCOG help group. Okay, bye.